Hello, and welcome to our debate. We will be presenting an informal debate on service delivery for transition age youth and adults, empowerment versus care. The purpose of this debate is to discuss whether or not individuals with disabilities are provided with enough support and opportunities post-school as other individuals, while coming from the other side, the concern arises from service providers about liability. My name is Krista White, and I am the introducer. The other members of our group are Allison Romansky, our summarizer, Amy Amsberg, our illustrator, Caitlin Corboy, our researcher, and Emma Selke, our fielder. Allison will now introduce our main point, which is the options for work for a person with a disability.
Hi, I'm Allison, and I will be talking about the main point, which is the options for work with a person with a disability, and also the counterpoint, which is the issues related to liability for employers. I like to begin saying that there has a lot of research showing that most adults with autism are unemployed or underemployed. In Singh's article, 2/3 of young adults with autism had neither a job nor educational plans during their first 2 years after high school. For over a third of young adults with autism, this continued into their early 20s. In addition to that, 20-somethings with autism were less likely to be employed than their peers with other disabilities. 58% employed. In comparison, 74% of young people with intellectual disabilities, 95% with learning disabilities, and 91% with a speech impairment or emotional disturbance were employed in their early 20s. Between the years of 2002 and 2011, the number of individuals with autism seeking vocational services that could help them find such work has increased. Despite support from vocational rehabilitation programs, people with autism receive low wages and limited working hours. This needs to be changed. Parodies brought up that techniques include video modeling, in which coworkers, supervisors, or job coaches demonstrate new tasks or effective ways of communicating on the job, adopting coworkers as mentors, and providing technological supports such as smartphones or tablets. On-the-job training is also key to securing competitive employment for either gender. A 2-year residential program in Phoenix, Arizona, called First Place Transition Academy, matches individuals with jobs often within months. Students receive on-the-job training supplemented by courses in independent living that range from personal finance to conflict resolution. The Autism Research Institute and the education company Optimize launched another new resource for young adults with autism. This is called Learn the Steps, Get Employed. The online course consists of videos that deliver bite-sized lessons, each less than 5 minutes long, that take learners through the steps of researching jobs, applying for them, and then conducting successful interviews. Pavlides stated in an article that Maslow came up with the theory of human motivation. This motivation is referred to as the hierarchy of needs. The hierarchy of needs is often depicted as a pyramid. This pyramid has fundamental human needs that are ranked from the most basic psychological drives, such as hunger and thirst, through safety needs, social needs, and ultimately the need for what Maslow referred to as self-actualization. Maslow's hypothesis was that humans are motivated to satisfy fundamental needs before they become concerned about higher order ones. More recently, social scientists have examined the components of what makes for quality of life, or simply put, what makes us happy. Just as with Maslow's hierarchy, this model focuses first on accessing food and shelter and ultimately friends, family, and activities we find meaningful. But at the core of need fulfillment is employment. Employment creates access to life's necessities. Money may not buy happiness, but it can create opportunity. It buys food and shelter. Perhaps equally important, Employment can drive personal satisfaction and can make us feel as though we are valued community members. She then continued to comment in the article how it is important to ascertain what types of support an adult with autism is likely to require to help ensure success on the job. It may be useful to think about supports as spanning a continuum, from most to least intensive. They are as followed. Segregated employment. This is state-funded placement in a program specifically designed for adults with developmental disabilities. These programs are rarely specific to individuals with autism. Segregated employment can be facility-based. This is often referred to as sheltered workshops, or can be designed to supervise work groups in the community. Individuals must meet eligibility requirements. Moving on, we have supported employment. This is state or federally funded jobs support such as job development and coaching. It provides in the community, although most often provided one-to-one. Some agencies provide group supports in an inclusive setting. Transportation to and from the job may or may not be included in the support. Individuals must meet requirements with that one also. Next, we have competitive employment with employer agency support. This is job development and on-site support occurring when a private agency works in a combination with an employer. Agencies are most often reimbursed privately, although nonprofit organizations may access grant money to develop these endeavors. Next, we have competitive employment with family support. Family members provide support in locating and applying for a job, but provide no support on site. Often, family members help provide transportation to and from the site. Next, we have fully independent competitive employment. This is locating, applying for, obtaining, and maintaining a job with little to no assistance. According to Lattimore, Parsons, and Reed, the most apparent guideline is that to enhance on-the-job performance of the new work duties, simulation training should be provided when feasible before supported workers begin the new duties. Providing simulation training prior to initiating duties should result in less time having to be devoted to work training skills on the job. As such, simulation training could help resolve the common problem in supported jobs involving with severe disabilities, in which either the expected amount of work is not completed due to time spent in training, or job coaches perform the work for the supported workers. Also, in the Wayman case study, it suggested that supported employment is definitely an effective service for enhancing the vocational rehabilitation outcomes of young adults. This supported employment provides valuable information for policymakers, healthcare providers, rehabilitation counselors, and educators.
Thank you, Allison. A study referenced on enhancing job site training of supported workers with autism by Lattimore, Parsons, and Reed found that job site training, which is assumed to be best practice for teaching vocational skills, is likely to be more effective if supplemented with simulation training that you mentioned. A major limitation of this study, however, is that the exclusive use of simulation training was not evaluated for comparison.
Thank you, Caitlin. Now, Allison will discuss our counterpoint, which is issues related to liability with employers.
Thank you. According to Kay, Jans, and Jones, research revealed somewhat negative attitudes, especially those asking employers about more stigmatized types of disability. Most employer surveys appear to paint a picture of successfully accommodated workers in a more or less welcoming environment. If we were to accept such findings at face value, we would be left wondering why the employment situation for working age adults with disabilities remains dismal, a full 2 decades after the enactment of the ADA. Workers and job seekers with disabilities, for their part, often cite employer attitudes and workplace discriminations as barriers to acquiring or keeping a job. Also, one explanation is that true employer attitudes and experiences are not being obtained from employer surveys, either because employers are not being completely honest or because only employers with positive attitudes and experiences are responding to the surveys. The former could be the result of social desirability bias, in which respondents essentially report what they think the interviewer wants to hear rather than expressing their true attitudes, which are socially unacceptable and may run counter to legal requirements. To continue with the study, some respondents referred specifically to essential job functions, but others said the problem was more subtle, related to what one respondent called the other things that come with the job. One respondent wrote, "Employers want employees who are flexible and could do more than one task. They feel people with disabilities are limited." Another pointed out that in this day and age, workers need to multitask and assume different roles during emergencies, something he or she thought might be a problem for workers with disabilities. A separate, frequently mentioned issue was a greater absenteeism, always calling in sick, absence from work too often, and time off from work for doctor's appointments. Several respondents appeared to hold these views themselves, indicating that they associate disability with poor health. The next topic, most often mentioned by respondents, was lack of knowledge or experience with people with disabilities, misconceptions as to what a person with a disability is capable of, and lack of knowledge about discrimination laws and reasonable accommodations. One respondent wrote, "A lot of employers misunderstand or do not know the laws. They need to be educated. In addition to learning more about the ADA, employers should have training on disabilities and how to accommodate or handle them." One respondent offered specifics. Sometimes employers need to help in rethinking how the work can be completed. They need help in seeing how jobs can be done in a new way. Next among the comments were concerns over costs, including those making the work sites accessible, increased insurance premiums, and individual accommodations. Respondents also reinforced their agreement that fear of lawsuits and discrimination complaints was a central issue, along with a broader concern over liability in case of injury or accident. Yet traditional vocational programs often do not help them get good jobs. According to a number of studies published over the past decade, some dated methods of job coaching can actually hinder adults with autism from securing meaningful employment. Ineffective programs include those that fail to foster mentoring opportunities or collaborative relationships with coworkers. And sheltered workshops in public schools or rehabilitation programs often isolate people with disabilities by providing no opportunities to pursue work in the community. These lead to poor earnings and career outcomes. According to Noel et al., several barriers were more common among youth with developmental disabilities, including lack of work experience, cognitive problems, lack of social skills, and behavioral problems. Other barriers were more common among youth with psychiatric disabilities, including failure to engage in programs, poor control over psychiatric symptoms, and history of trauma, failure to engage in clinical services, substance abuse dependence, housing problems, and even criminal history. Employers may have concerns about having to pay extensive work training, continual supervision, and other expensive accommodations when they employ an adult with autism. In the Jacob et al. Article, it explained that there may be a gap in research contributing to this. Additionally, there's no current evidence available that identifies if there is a worthwhile financial cost-benefit ratio to the employer's business from hiring an adult with autism in terms of productivity. Now we have Caitlin with the research support.
Thank you, Allison. Summarized findings from the case study suggest, as cited by respondents, that the principal barriers to employing workers with disabilities are lack of awareness of disability and accommodation issues, concern over costs, and fear of legal liability. With regard to strategies employers might use to increase hiring and retention, respondents identified increased training and centralized disability and accommodation expertise and mechanisms. Public policy approaches preferred by respondents include no-cost external problem solving, subsidized accommodations, tax breaks, and mediation in lieu of formal complaints or lawsuits. A limitation of this study, as previously mentioned by Allison, is the potential of social desirability bias. Findings from the study by Noel et al. On the barriers to employment for transition-age youth with developmental and psychiatric disabilities suggest that despite receiving evidence-based employment services, youth with disabilities encounter many barriers to employment, and that awareness of these barriers may help employment programs anticipate challenges and then develop strategies to help avoid these barriers. A major limitation of the study, though, was the lack of demographic data.
Thank you, Caitlin. The following table was taken from Kay's article, Why Don't Employers Hire and Retain Workers with Disabilities? It visually represents employer concerns about hiring individuals with disabilities. The participants in this study consisted of 463 individuals who have been labeled by the Disability and Business Technical Assistance Centers as ADA non-compliant in the past. The responses in this survey were given anonymously to help receive the most accurate information possible. As you can see, the main concerns involve providing reasonable accommodations, uncertainty about how to handle said individuals, and the fear of legal retribution for firing any individual with a disability. This is relevant to our discussion because it gives us insight into honest opinions and concerns for employers when hiring individuals with disabilities. It can help us better provide assurance, support, and accountability to employers as well as prepare individuals with disabilities to handle barriers such as these. This second table is taken from the post-high school outcomes of young adults with disabilities up to 6 years after high school. Key findings from the National Longitudinal Transition Study 2. The participants of this study consisted of 11,276 individuals over a 10-year span. It visually relays employment percentages post-high school by disability. As you can see, learning disability and speech language impairment have the highest employment rate at 78.6% and 67.8%. But as the disability requires more support, the employment rates go down. The employment rate for individuals with autism is only 45.2%, multiple disabilities at 46.1%, and the lowest employment being for individuals with deaf or blindness. This visual is relevant to our discussion because it creates awareness for disabilities that are severely lacking in post-high school employment.
Thank you, Amy. So everybody brought up really great points, and there does seem to be a gap between employment rates and individuals with and without disabilities. It is important for everyone to have an opportunity for employment in order to have a fulfilling quality of life. Employers have concerns regarding employing those with disabilities, but policies can be put into place that can ease those concerns and lessen the gap of employment between individuals with and without disabilities. After listening to both points and the research supporting these points, I have gathered some questions. They are as following. Does an individual's age seem to be a determining factor in terms of employment?
I can take that one. Yes, individuals with disabilities who are what is termed transition aged often are employed at lower rates than individuals without disability. And transition age is ages 16 to about 24, according to Noel et al. It's also important to note that those with a childhood onset disability are more likely to feel as though they are discriminated against as opposed to those whose disability arose in adulthood, as found by Moore et al. In 2011.
Thank you, Caitlin. Another question. Aside from liabilities, what are some other reasons employers seem to shy away from hiring those with disabilities?
I'll take that one. There is a concern about cost and lack of knowledge in accommodating and handling individuals with disabilities.
Thanks, Allison. Another question. What policies can employers put into place that would increase the likelihood of hiring individuals with disabilities?
Providing workplace accommodations, including more training for those with disabilities, will allow employers to feel as though they are able to hire individuals at a higher rate. Putting policies into place requiring employers to make accommodations will also increase the likelihood of employers willing to hire those with disabilities, according to Moore et al. In 2011.
Thank you. Are there biases in place that are creating a barrier for education or employment?
I'll take that one, Emma. Yes, there is a inherent bias by the employers and the individuals that they think they will not be successful, as according to Carter et al.
Thanks. Does the type of disability impact employment rates?
I'll take that one. Yes, those with autism are not only employed at lower rates, but they also are paid at a lower wage than those with other disabilities.
Thank you. Are there any particular types of educational or employment opportunities readily available for disabilities compared to others?
I can take that one. Yes, their largest three categories of employment for youth with disabilities include food preparation and service, sales, and office and administrative support occupations, according to Sanford et al.
Thank you. And last question, what are some ethical concerns regarding employment or lack of opportunity for employment?
And I'll take the last one. All individuals have the right to a good quality of life. Employment often plays a part of that. Those who hold a job often have a better quality of life, including life satisfaction and purpose, than those who don't.
Thanks, Allison. Again, everyone deserves a satisfying quality of life, and for many, being employed or seeking higher education leads to this. More questions need to be answered, and more research needs to be conducted to fully grasp the gap between employment and individuals with and without disabilities. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to ask us any questions. Thank you. Bye.